11:25. It's Miss Campbell. I am currently in my room, in my pajamas, sitting on my couch, and I thought it would be a perfect time to do a little bit of a read aloud of Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus. I just did the recap earlier today with Miss Wellard about what we've read so far, and we left off almost at the end of chapter 10. I'm going to go back about a page and I'm going to keep reading from there. Fern is running around my feet right now, doing crazy things. So, oh, look, she just jumped onto my chair. So if I have to stop, it's because Fern is doing something crazy. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started in the middle of chapter 10. "Hi, Henry," I said. "This is my friend Connor." I felt a little warm fuzzy in my chest when I used the words, "my friend." Henry smiled at Connor and then turned back to me. "You all ready for the next rodeo?" I glanced at Connor. "I'm not going to be in any rodeo." Henry laughed. "That'll be the day. A rodeo without Avon." "Well, say hi to Joe for me." He started to walk back inside. "I don't know any Joe," I called to Henry. "Do you know Joe?" Henry just chuckled again and did that same little hand wave like he had when I told him I didn't know anything about tarantulas. "You're such a joker," he said. Then he turned and went back into the soda shop. "That was weird," Connor said. "Who's Joe?" "I don't know," I said. "The owner of the park's name is Joe Kavanaugh, but I guess no one ever sees him or seems to know anything about him. The accountant told my parents that he never visits the museum." I leaned in and lowered my voice. "And get this. Pictures of the Kavanaughs in the museums here have been removed." "That's strange," Connor said. "I wonder why." "I don't know. I found this old storage shed behind the buildings, though. It has 7 do not enter signs on it and an old broken handle that was padlocked. I couldn't get the doors open, but you might be able to. You want to try?" Connor nodded excitedly. "Yeah, let's go." I led him down the short trail until we reached the old wood shed. It looked like it was on the verge of collapse, much like several of the other buildings at the park. "See all the signs?" I said. "Cool. I wonder what's in there." After a few tugs and grunts, Connor was able to slide the door open enough so that we could squeeze through the opening. I scraped my nose a bit on the old wooden door, and I hoped I didn't get any splinters in my face. Getting them out would not be fun. Connor and I looked around at the stacks of boxes and piles of junk, the shelves stuffed with old books and papers and props. "Where do we even begin?" I said. I looked up and I saw a box perched on top of one of the old bookshelves. The writing on it was faded and water-stained, but I could just barely make out 3 letters. A, V, a water-stained space, and then an N. "Check out that box up there," I told Connor. He looked up and read the letters A, V, N. We took a moment in silence before Connor barked, startling me. "Avon!" he cried. I snorted. "Of course not Avon." I thought for a moment. "Kavanaugh!" "Oh, right." Connor smacked himself in the head. "Stupid." He stared at it a while. How do we get it down? I looked around the room for a ladder or something. "I could try headbutting it off the shelf," I said. Connor laughed. "If we can find something for me to stand on, I think I can get it down." We found a little table covered in old documents in one corner of the room. Connor moved the papers off it and dragged the table to the bookshelf. He climbed up and brought the box down, then placed it on the table and opened it. "This stuff is old," he said, pulling out a book that looked like it had been soaked in water and left to dry out in the heat repeatedly. Though it was badly damaged, we could make out the big, hairy tarantula on the cover. "More tarantula stuff?" I mumbled, studying the cover. "What's the deal with tarantula stuff?" Connor asked. Someone here was really into them. There are several tarantula pictures in the soda shop and a tarantula display in the museum. Connor pulled out another book, a sketchbook. The pages made brittle, crinkling sounds as Connor turned them. "Careful," I told him, as a corner of one page broke off. We studied the sketches. There were several drawings of the horses and Stagecoach Pass, and of course of tarantulas. There was also a detailed sketch of a necklace with a blue stone on it. Connor pointed at the date on one of the pictures, 1973. Someone made these over 40 years ago, he said. We looked through the rest of the box and found some horse figurines, an old hairbrush, a glass case that reminded me of an aquarium. Why would there be an aquarium of all things in here? I said. He shook his head. Maybe it's for something else. I carefully turned the fragile pages of the sketchbook with my toes and stopped on a sketch of a tarantula. It was quite lifelike. Someone had spent a lot of time sketching every tiny hair on each of the 8 legs. Someone who clearly had a serious interest in these giant spiders. I think you're right. Chapter 11. The next day, after school, Mom was out checking on a beef delivery for the steakhouse, and Dad was dealing with a chicken that had gotten loose from the petting zoo when I heard a knock on the apartment door. I put down my e-reader and got up to see who was there. I had been reading a new book called Stargirl. I picked it up for 2 reasons. 1, it took place in the Arizona desert, and I was doing everything I could to come to terms with my new living situation. I thought reading an interesting story set here might make me view it differently. And 2, it was about a girl who didn't totally fit in with everybody. She's completely her own unique self and doesn't care what anyone thinks. I wish I could say the same thing. I heard the bark before I even opened the door, and I knew it was Connor. I asked him how school went as we walked down the stairway together. Okay, he said. A couple of kids barked at me. It's so embarrassing when they do that because I always bark back. I scowled. They wouldn't get away with that if I was there. I wasn't kidding either. This injustice would not stand. This unfairness would not be tolerated. As soon as I learned how to use nunchucks... So how was your day? Connor asked, interrupting my little daydream. I didn't see you at the library today. I didn't want to tell him that I had eaten lunch in the bathroom stall. It was okay. I didn't go to the library because my mom doesn't want me to skip lunch anymore. It makes me cranky. I gave him a serious look. Low blood sugar. He smiled. It sucks that we don't have any classes together. Maybe you can stop by the library after you eat lunch, even if it's only for a few minutes? Sure. Hey, you want to get an ice cream? Before he could answer, I stomped up the steps of the soda shop. I waited for him to open the door for me. Not that I wasn't capable of opening it with my chin and shoulder. I just figured I'd let him be a gentleman. But he opened it begrudgingly and scowled. I don't think I want any. How can you say no to free ice cream? I said as I walked to the counter. Didn't you know I'm a VIP here? I get free ice cream, free coleslaw, free arrests, and all the free gold spray-painted rocks my heart could ever desire. I told Henry that I wanted a double scoop of mint and chip in a bowl. While he scooped the ice cream, I asked him, Hey, what did you mean about a rodeo? When was the last time Stagecoach Pass even had a rodeo? The arena looked like it hadn't seen a rodeo in about 100 years. I looked at Henry, but he was just standing there, staring at my torso. His mouth hung open. The scooper in his hands dripped ice cream onto the floor. What? I asked him. What on earth happened to your arms? He seemed extremely concerned. Connor and I glanced at each other. You know I don't have any arms, Henry. Well, you used to, he declared. He stared confusedly at the empty space where my arms should hang. Did you lose those in a horse riding accident? What? Yeah, he said a little more clearly. You were in a horse riding accident, weren't you? That must be what happened. No, Henry, I said. That's not what happened. Yeah, like a horse trampled my arms off. I trampled my arms. Just trampled my arms clean off. Henry's face seemed to clear up a little, and he looked at Connor. What would you like, son? Nothing for him, I said. He's on a strict diet of air. As Henry continued scooping my ice cream, Connor whispered to me. That was so weird. I know, I whispered back. Henry placed a scoop of chocolate on the counter. Darn it, I would never get that mint chip. And Connor carried it for me outside. We sat in the rocking chairs on the porch again while I ate my ice cream, holding the spoon with my toes. Connor barked at a couple of visitors passing by. They looked up at him in surprise. Then they saw me and were extra surprised. I hate it when people look at me, he muttered. Me too. Connor turned his attention to me. You know you're really good at that. At what? That, he said, eating the ice cream. Wow, how many people do you think get complimented for how good they are at eating ice cream? I guess it's 13 years of practice that makes me such a pro. It's a pretty good skill. Anyone could do it if they have to, I said. Connor shrugged. So what do you think that was all about in there? I had no idea. Henry is a very confused person. Connor and I heard a squeaking sound, and we both turned and looked at the soda shop window. Henry was cleaning it with a spray can of whipped cream. He waved at us through the smear. Connor waved back. What's wrong with him? He asked me. Mom says he has dementia. I guess it makes him confused and forgetful. He's super old, too, obviously. Do you think he knows anything about the Kavanaughs? Connor asked. He's worked here since forever, so if anyone knew anything about them, it would probably be him. He just doesn't seem to understand anything. I watched as Henry scowled at the glass, with a, why won't this darn window cleaner work, sort of expression. His arms crossed. I smiled at him, and his face brightened. He disappeared. Apparently not concerned about the creamy window anymore. Why do you think the Kavanaughs are so secretive? Connor asked. I have no idea, I thought to myself for a moment. Maybe they're criminals hiding from the law. Or maybe they're famous, Connor said. Yeah, maybe they're famous members of a boy band, and they don't want anyone to know that they also dabble in Western-themed amusement parks, because it would ruin their cool pop star image. Now the storytelling gears in my mind were turning. Or maybe they're escaped rodeo clowns, and the rodeo clown mafia is out to get them. Connor chuckled. Why would they be out to get them? Maybe they pulled a prank on the wrong person. You know, shot someone they shouldn't have in the face with one of those flowers that squirt water, or hit someone on the head with a squeaky foam hammer, and that person did not find it funny. And now that person is out for revenge. I had to admit, that theory was totally believable. Or maybe someone's already gotten their revenge on the Kavanaughs, Connor said. Maybe they're dead. He looked so serious that little goosebumps broke out on my arms. A loud beeping sound startled me. I looked down Main Street and saw a large truck backing up to the steakhouse. Mom walked outside with a clipboard in her hands. I turned to Connor. Have you ever pulled any pranks? I asked him, hoping to lighten the mood. He shrugged. My friends and I toilet papered a teacher's house a couple of weeks ago. He grimaced. We got in a lot of trouble. What about you? Oh, well, no big deal. But I only pulled just the most awesome prank of all time. What did you do? Connor said excitedly. Well, back in 4th grade, we knew we were going to have a substitute teacher one day because our teacher had to go to a funeral. So, my best friend, Emily, took these arms from one of her mom's mannequins. Why did she have mannequins? She had a lot of sewing and stuff. I think she used them to model her clothes and take pictures or something. Anyway, Emily brought them to school in her backpack, but they were really big, so the hands stuck out of the top. Connor laughed. Like zombie arms? Yeah, it was like Night of the Living Dead. So, anyway, when we got into our classroom, our covert operation went into effect. Emily and another friend, Matthew, tried to help me secretly stuff the arms up the armholes of my long-sleeve shirt, but the tops of the arms were too big to fit up the sleeves. So we had the brilliant idea to stuff them down into the sleeves through the neck hole. The arms were so much longer than my sleeves that they stuck way out of the bottom, and I totally looked like a mutant with arms hanging down all the way to my knees. But we decided we'd come too far and had to go with it anyway. Matthew held both of the mannequin hands in his to hold the arms up. When the teacher called for us all to take our seats, I yelled out, "Matthew, let go of my arms," and he pulled on the fake arms. The idea had been that he would basically pull my arms off and then hold them up over his head in triumph, howling like a wild barbarian. "Cool," Connor said. Yeah, I agreed. It would have been. What our dumb 4th grade brains had failed to realize, though, was that because the arms wouldn't fit up my sleeves, they wouldn't completely fit down my sleeves either. The arms got stuck about halfway out. Matthew yanked them and yanked on them, but they wouldn't come out of my sleeves. So what happened? Since the arms weren't coming out of my sleeves and our plan was totally falling apart, I started crying out, "Oh no, my arms, you're tearing my arms off. I can feel my arms being torn off out of the sockets right now as we speak. Oh, the humanity, my poor arms." Everyone was laughing, but the sub just stared at us. Matthew gave up and went to his seat. So I did too. My sleeves were so stretched out that the arms dragged on the floor next to me as I walked, and I had to maneuver around them to sit down at my desk. Connor covered his mouth. "Oh no, did you get in trouble?" "No, the sub was actually pretty nice. She didn't tattle on me to the principal or anything like that, though she did make me wear those stupid arms until lunchtime." Connor laughed. "I bet you looked pretty silly." Yeah. I don't know if I'd call that the most awesome prank of all time. Yeah, it was kind of a fail. Epic fail, Connor said. I looked down at the bowl of ice cream already melting into a soup in the heat. I didn't feel like eating it anymore. After all, I had really wanted that mint chip. "You want the rest of this?" I asked Connor. He shook his head. I turned my attention back to the steakhouse. "You know the gun show is starting in about an hour," I grinned mischievously to myself. If I had hands, they would have been doing the evil finger-tapping thing right below my chin. Connor gave me a confused look. So I put my ice cream down and jumped up from my rocking chair. "Follow me." Connor followed me to the steakhouse where Mom had finally finished up with the delivery and Chuck had left. We snuck around to the back entrance and made our way to the kitchen where cooks, busboys, and servers were all bustling around, getting ready for dinner. We stood secretly behind the giant commercial fridge. Connor and I watched in disgust as a busboy mixed a giant vat of coleslaw with his hands, his arms buried in it all the way to his biceps. He was wearing a tank top, and we saw he had coleslaw juice dripping from his armpit hair. Connor made a sort of laughing, gagging sound beside me, and I said, "Remind me to never eat coleslaw here again." Connor giggled and barked. He should have little hairnets for his armpits. "What y'all doing in here?" we heard from behind us. I whirled around to find Josephine standing behind me, her arms crossed. Josephine had already introduced herself to me on the day we moved to Stagecoach Pass. She had come to Arizona from Texas when she was only a teenager and had been working at the park since forever. She was currently serving, hostessing, and doing all kinds of jobs for the steakhouse. Seemed to me like she ran the place. She was probably 80 years old, but she could still carry one of the giant trays that held a dozen bowls of cowboy beans. I thought quickly. Mom just told me to grab a couple of steaks for dinner." Josephine gazed at me with that strange look she had given me the first time I met her. Sometimes, when I was in the steakhouse, I'd catch her staring at me from across the restaurant. I was used to people staring at me, but this was different somehow. "Well, she was just here." Josephine scratched at her cropped red hair, obviously dyed. No 80-year-old had hair that color. "Why she didn't just take a couple then?" I shrugged. "She forgot." "All right. Grab them and then stay out of the way. Dinner's startin'." She plowed through the swinging doors that led to the dining room like she was on a serious mission. Connor opened the giant commercial fridge and grabbed 2 thin cuts of steak. Then we rummaged through the counter drawers until we found some kitchen twine and a pair of scissors. We made our way upstairs to the apartment. I was relieved to find it empty. Mom must have gone off to deal with another job or a crisis. It seemed that the work never ended here. It was sloppy and haphazard, but Connor managed to dig a hole in each of the stakes, tie the twine through them, and then tie them around the t-shirt sleeves, going through the arm and neck holes. I loosely draped a cardigan over my shoulders, and we made our way downstairs and out to the street to watch the gunfight, where a small crowd was already forming. "Don't be so nervous," I told Connor, as his ticking increased. "It's just there are a lot of people around," he said. Yeah, there were like 4 people standing by us. We had to wait only a minute before the cowboys came out and started yelling at each other. I tapped my foot while they went through their daily spiel. Finally, the moment came when the blue shirt cowboy, who also happened to be a server at the steakhouse, raised his gun and pointed it at the cowhide chap's cowboy, who also worked in the souvenir shop, and shouted, "When I'm done with you, there won't be anything left to snore." I made sure I was standing behind cowhide chap's cowboy. Blue shirt cowboy always missed cowhide chap's cowboy with the first shot, but today he wouldn't miss completely. Teehee. At the moment that blue shirt cowboy fired, I cried out in pain and shrugged the cardigan dramatically off my shoulders. Connor snickered beside me with his hand over his mouth. A couple of kids standing nearby screamed in terror, and their parents looked alarmed for about 1 second, all the time it took to assess the situation. Come on, it was clearly 2 stakes clumsily tied to my t-shirt, and not 2 shot up my arms. The cowboy stopped mid-fight and stared at me, probably not sure what to make of my stake arms. As the little kids cried and clung to their parents' legs, afraid that their arms were next, the fight was all messed up now, and people started dispersing into the rest of the park. The cowboys glared at me. Connor draped the cardigan back over my shoulders, and I smiled sheepishly at them. "Sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to mess up your show." The next morning, the cowboys went and complained to Dad about my shenanigans. He and Mom and I sat at the little kitchen table over bowls of cereal after they busted me. "The goal, Avon," Dad said, "is to bring visitors into the park." He gestured dramatically toward himself. "Not scare them out of the park." He threw his hands back out. I nodded in understanding. "Won't happen again." He gave a satisfied nod and pushed his bowl away. He stood up and kissed the top of my head. "Have a good day at school, sheeps." After Dad left, Mom looked at me and pursed her lips. She took a bite of cereal and chewed it. "It was a pretty good prank." "Yeah, it was," I said. And we finished breakfast together, communicating only through overly stern looks and repressed giggles. Alright, that's the end of chapter 11. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video there. Before I do, I think you guys should check out Fern. She's currently sitting on my desk chair where she was laying for the whole read aloud, listening to the video. Alright, good night. Room 25, tune in to the next chapter.